In noisy world, we pause and hear a wiser path is becoming clear. Peaceful voices.
Welcome, my friends. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to introduce you to Brian Winters. He is an autodidact. He is a purveyor of Gandhian wisdom. He explores the fast for peace, and he is here to share his thoughts and his ambitions and hopes for specifically the United States and North America, but as well as hopes for ways to use the political system to help bring peace and a better way of life for everybody. And this is something I personally don't know a lot about, so I'm really looking forward to my chance to learning from you. Brian, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for inviting me, John. I appreciate it. Yeah. So we met in a nonviolence workshop a few weeks ago, and we're glad we have a chance to talk further.
Yeah, me too. If I may, one of the things I like to ask everybody in the beginning is because often the conversation revolves around often very hopeless topics, and a lot of the activists that I speak with, they tend to be on the low end of their emotional swing. And so I'm hoping that you can share with us something that is offering you hope, something that gives you a sense of passion and something that drives you forward toward the future in a way that is positive rather than being driven from something behind us, chasing us down.
It's all positive. Here in the United States, though, that it's an election year, that it's our 250th, we celebrated our 250th birthday.
That's right.
And that is an opportunity for the United States to reinvent itself. With a year of Jubilee. And I think we can do that using the principles of nonviolence to put our nation on a bright and bountiful path into the future. So.
That's a really wonderful way to think of it. And you mentioned that one of the great inspirations for you has been Gandhi, his life and his path. Can you talk a little bit about how you stumbled across him and how that has guided you?
Sure. So, it's been obvious for a while that the political system has not been serving the average person.
Yes.
And so in my 20s, I spent most of my 20s working with a third party, trying to challenge the system from the outside, right? If you could get enough people to vote third party, then you could get into power and you could put things right. Well, eventually I recognized that third parties do not work. So I spent most of my 30s serving in the state legislature as a member of the blue team, trying to fix the system from the inside. Well, eventually I realized trying to fix the system from the inside does not work either.
Yes.
It was kind of depressing sometimes, the amount of influence that lobbyists had on the legislative process, where they'd walk into our committee, hand us a sheet of paper, and okay, this is what we would like the law to be. And lots of times we would just rubber stamp it, and that's how a bill becomes a law.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I'm very grateful for the years that I spent there. I got a chance to hear a lot of new perspectives and get a new way of looking at things. But eventually, like I said, I realized that working inside the system wasn't going to work either. So about 10 years ago, as I started to get older, I started to reflect a little more, and I quit drinking and I quit dating. And all of a sudden, John, I had so much more free time that I could really, read and expand my mind in the way that I had always done a little bit before, but now I could really take it up a notch. And one of the many biographies I read in those first 6 months was one of Gandhi. And then I read a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth. Later I would learn that Dr. Martin Luther King, when he first heard a lecture on Gandhi, he went out and bought a half a dozen biographies to learn more about him. And so I had sort of a similar experience because I was confident, I was positive there was a better way to organize things in the world, that what we were doing was not optimal. And so the Gandhian perspective really appealed to me. For a couple of reasons. And one of them was, as somebody who had recently quit drinking, Gandhi talks against alcohol throughout his life. In fact, it's his very earliest political writings when he was a young law student in London at the ripe old age of 21, talking bad about the British Empire because they allowed alcohol in India, which so that resonated nicely with me as well.
And for everyone who's listening, I'm putting links down below to all of your writings about Gandhi, your blog, and any other connections toward Gandhi, and your recommended first books to pick up about him, and everything will be down below in the description for people to follow.
Okay. The book that I recommend on Gandhi is Jad Adams' Naked Ambition,
Okay.
which is not a hagiography. Is not it is a critical look at his life. It's short. It's only about 300 pages, but it's a well-rounded biography that examines his life. So that's the one that I recommend that people start on. There's a lot of good ones though. So one of the things that interested me about Gandhi was his practice of fasting, and as an American, wasn't something that I had ever really tried or experienced or considered. Right, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You gotta eat every day. You gotta if you get hungry, there's a Dunkin' Donuts or a McDonald's or something like right there to stop off, and yeah. So in 2017, for the 70th anniversary of India's independence, Gandhi had called for a fast for peace on August 15th, 1947. It was the day that his nonviolent war of independence succeeded and the British turned India back over to the people. With the caveat that as they left, they divided it into three sections: Pakistan, India, and what's now Bangladesh. And so Gandhi saw this as vivisection. He saw that the stress that it was causing on the country he loved very much, and he called for people to not celebrate, but to observe a day of fasting. And so I decided, all right, well, I'm going to try this on August 15th. I'm going to try going without food for a day. I don't know what that's going to be like, but I was pretty sure I wasn't going to starve to death. So I explained what I was going to do with my kids, and they were supportive. So the night before, I had a late dinner, a second dinner just in case. And then on the 15th, I didn't eat anything, and it was okay. I wasn't like really uncomfortable, and so 24 hours went by, and it was the night of the 15th. It's like, all right, well, I could probably wait till breakfast. And then in the morning, I was still feeling okay. I said, well, I wonder what else I'm capable. I was really expecting to be uncomfortable, John, and it hadn't happened. So with my kids, I explained it to my kids, and they're like, all right. My son said, okay, you can go a second day, but that's it. Tomorrow, the third day, you have to eat. I said, okay, that seems fair. So sure enough, so I went through the second day and I went into the third day, and so after 57 hours, I broke my first fast, and I was just amazed at how good I still felt. That this thing that I've been told my entire life, that you needed to eat 3 square meals a day, just wasn't true.
Yeah.
And that how capable humans are, like the potential that we have. And so the following month on the 15th, I invited other friends to join me in a fast. And we've been doing that every month on the 15th ever since. And the idea behind a group fast is there's a lot of aspects to it. There's a lot of aspects to it. Religions have used group fasts for thousands of years as a way of, and Muslims still do. 2 billion Muslims around the planet, act in solidarity to reinforce their membership to this larger community.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Again, yes. One of the other things that I liked is that fasting is an act of free will, right? You have to eat. It's not optional. If you don't eat, you will die. But as an act of free will, you can abstain for a period of time. And so that aspect of fasting of saying, sort of like when you jump, gravity is going to pull you back down. But for a while, you can resist the bonds of gravity. You can demonstrate your independence. So fasting as an act of free will, as a voluntary thing, there's power in that.
There is.
Because it takes an intention. And so that shared intention has power and has moral authority when directed in the right ways.
That's beautiful.
And so so I invite you and your viewers to join us for the Fast for Peace on the 15th of each month. It's a simple water-only fast, no food, no recreational intoxicants, just drink water for a 24-hour period. Gandhi recommended, and I recommend, have dinner on the night of the 14th, and then in the morning you skip breakfast, skip lunch, and after 24 hours, have dinner again. So you never have to go to bed hungry. And, the number of I couldn't tell you how many people have tried this at some point, over these last 7 years with me for the first time. And they're almost always amazed. Like, I thought it'd be more difficult. And some of them do get hungry, and I was really grumpy or distracted. And like most things, right, with practice, it becomes easier.
That's right.
Yeah.
Your system acclimates. Well, and I feel as though before this particular recorded chat, we were talking a little bit about how a simple life is a really lovely one to live, and especially in relationship with the common culture of the United States, which is very much consumption based. It's very much, if we get together, we're going to have a huge feast, or if people can afford it, we're going to have lots of different things to eat. We're going to have lots of presents on holidays, and everything's about big explosions for the 4th of July, and everything is large and overdone. And the simple clarity that comes with just being like, I'm just going to remove something. I'm going to take away this. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to eat a little less. I'm going to maybe fast from a certain identity that I had for a while. And those can be incredibly powerful in a culture where we're adding another layer of something is the way that we process everything that we do. And so I'm really appreciative of your perspective.
Absolutely. We met in a discussion about constructive programs. Gandhi developed, which is a program of positive improvement for individuals and communities. And, as we discussed, I have designed a constructive program for the United States. And the monthly Fast for Peace serves as the hub of this program for many of the reasons that you just described, which is being, shifting American culture in a way away from consumption, right? And practicing doing with less. The idea being that if you can incorporate that practice once a month, that it will spread out into the other days of the month and into other aspects of your life.
That's wonderful. Gosh.
Well, but you hit it on, you really identified that, right? It is currently a cultural problem, right? Cultures change, things ebb and flow over time, and we're in need of a course correction, right? We need to shift away from this constant, overconsumption.
Yes.
So that's trying to offer a positive vision, positive path for doing that. And like a lot of things, again, fasting is outside the experience of many Americans. It's not a part of our culture, although it used to be. The framers, the founding fathers, used days of fasting on a semi-regular basis to unify the country, to establish a shared intention. At a time when the fastest form of communication was what we now lovingly call snail mail. But when after the Boston Tea Party in 1773, the British blockaded Boston Harbor, and in Virginia, Thomas Jefferson and the other patriots there, they were looking for a way to stand in solidarity with their fellow patriots in Massachusetts. And so Thomas Jefferson organized a day of fasting in the state of Virginia on June 2nd, 1774, as a way of doing that. So you couldn't really call them up and be like, we're with you. But that shared self-sacrifice, again, has power, has moral authority.
I love that. Yeah. And sometimes it comes under the name of the hunger strike, but it's the same. I'm abstaining from what you have to offer. And of course, there are certain places, even right now in the United States, that are using the hunger strike as a way to communicate with the press and to, just like Gandhi, to communicate the urgency of the need. That we don't have time to wait for this. This has to happen now because it's tied to our lives in a physical style of consumption, showing if I don't eat, I'll die. So let's get this done now. But in other ways as well, because the people that aren't as visible, they're also being pressured and they are being killed off. And by tying that sense of urgency of the moment to the strike itself, that I feel like adds a kind of urgency and a kind of clarity around the need of the moment that we have.
Well, that's certainly the intention of a hunger strike, is to add clarity or urgency. as you said. The fast for peace is not a hunger strike. Barring, extreme circumstances, nobody's going to starve to death in 24 hours.
That's right.
There are people with a handful, groups of people with medical conditions or things where it would be unsafe
Yes.
for them to go without food, if you're pregnant or nursing or things like that. And in which case, we invite people, as Gandhi did, to observe a minimal diet, fruit juice, whatever you need to be safely, but to still bring that intention to that 24-hour period of willingly giving something up.
That's beautiful. Gosh.
So it's interesting though about the hunger strikes, right? Because with a hunger strike, there's an aspect of coercion, right? Bad things are going to happen unless you change. Whereas a short, concentrated fast doesn't quite bring that same pressure, right? It's more to inspire and say, look, I'm not doing this because I'm greedy. Look at what I'm giving up for a larger goal, which in our case is working for peace, which you might know Dr. King defined as not the absence of tension, but the presence of justice.
Yes. So do you feel that the circumstances within which that Gandhi was making use of it, was that a specialized because of their culture and the time, and just to Gandhi in particular? Do you feel like he was using the quite intensive fasts that he did, the hunger strike that he was using at various times? Do you feel like that was a kind of, would you call that a nonviolent pressure? Or do you feel like because of that coercive quality that it's not as effective?
So depending on, so he did different types of fasts, right? Sometimes they were for a specific length of time. Sometimes they were open-ended. His first public fast was in March of 1918 in India. He was helping a group of mill workers that they were on strike, trying to hold out for better working conditions. And they were losing faith. They were ready to give up, that if they could go back to work for poverty wages, at least they'd be starving little by little instead of all at once. And so Gandhi saw that they were losing faith, and he knew he had to do something to galvanize. And so he swore an oath, I will not eat until you all get your raise that you deserve. And so that was an open-ended fast. I'm not sure that anybody really expected it to get to the point where he starved to death, but it was an open-ended commitment, right? That he was saying essentially, if necessary, I will dedicate the rest of my life to your cause.
Yes.
And so that first fast took place on March 15th. And so it's sort of the cousin of the fast for peace at the end of his life on August 15th, 1947.
Gosh, I love that. Yeah, that echo, bringing that forward.
Well, there's so many topics we could talk about, so I'll try not to get off onto too many tangents. But those two things, the one on March 15th was a spontaneous occurrence, right? He wasn't planning on it. He knew something had to be done, and so he took action. He did what was necessary. The one on the August 15th, 1947 was a planned thing, right? He was telling people ahead of time, the 15th is the day of our trial. Observe a fast on that day. And in fact, he was in Kolkata because it was a city that had seen some horrific riots 1 year earlier in 1946, like really terrible religious riots. John, Hindus and Muslims had fought it out in the street. 10,000, maybe 20,000 people died, and it's just, there were so many dead bodies in the streets. Like the British put a bounty on them. The buzzards would come down with the vultures, and they'd gorge themselves until they couldn't even fly anymore. Like it was a horrific thing. And then So for a year, the city had been in this uneasy truce. Like, was violence going to break out? And as August 15th approached, when the country was getting divided, everybody was afraid that things were going to fall apart there and explode. So Gandhi agreed to stay in the city, to share a house with the outgoing governor, Shahid Suhrawardy, and that they would share a house and fast together, one Hindu, one Muslim, and they would demonstrate, they would lead by example that Hindus and Muslims could live together, work together, coexist together peacefully. And John, it worked.
Hmm.
When August 15th hit in the city of Kolkata, the Hindus and Muslims took to the streets, but not to fight. They marched arm in arm in brotherhood. Peace was there.
Wow.
And the important thing, there are several lessons you can learn from this. And one of them is that the fast was just a symbol. It was something to rally around. Peace only worked because the people wanted peace. If the people didn't want it, Gandhi wouldn't have been able to change their minds. But people were looking for some sort of symbol, something that they could, again, a fast takes an intention. It's participatory. It's active. It's not passive. So that's the one thing. And I've forgotten what the other one is. Oh, the other one is that Gandhi, in fact, he took a medical exemption. He drank orange juice that day. Like, Gandhi was kind of phoning it in. And so he was like, he'd been doing this for years. The city fathers were like, we need you to stay and keep peace. He said, okay, I'll do it. Here's the conditions, but it wasn't. But so the real hero of that story was Shahid Suharwardi. He was a man who lived like the exact opposite life of Gandhi. Like, he was big and fat. He was greedy. He was Muslim, but he drank alcohol. He slept with a lot of women.
Wow.
And he was getting ready to leave. In fact, he would go on to become prime minister of Pakistan. A decade down the road, he was getting ready to leave. He could have walked away, but instead he stayed, and he sacrificed, and he shared that house with Gandhi. And so he was the real hero of the peace on August 15th, not Gandhi, but the people around him that came together to bring form to this vision of peace.
Wow.
So.
When you mentioned that you also you created a nice, long, a beautifully rounded list of constructive program possibilities for the United States in particular. Do you mind exploring some of those, or is there one that you'd like to focus on in particular?
Yeah. So briefly, Gandhi developed a constructive program for India that revolved around the spinning wheel. So he encouraged people to take up spinning. And the primary reason that he did this, John, was as an anti-poverty program. When he returned to India after spending a couple decades in South Africa, he really saw the abject poverty in his country. And so what do you do about that? How do you help people have more money? And so his solution was to find something productive for them to do. And so they revitalized the spinning industry and gave people something so in the off seasons when they weren't working the fields or whatever, they could spin. And then, what do you do with all that? Well, he made homespun cloth the symbol of the independence movement in India. People wore khadi, the white cloth. He popularized it. And it was a little more expensive than the textiles that you could get from Britain, the foreign cloth. And so this was another aspect of the constructive program. Right? How do you resist these foreign entanglements? How do you resist seeing your country's wealth shoveled off to another country? Well, you can boycott their goods. So if you're doing that, though, you have to provide a constructive alternative. So instead of buying foreign cloth, they made their own, made sure that money stayed in the country. And spinning is, a task that's repetitive, not too intensive for your mind. And so it encourages contemplation. So by doing it every day, you have time to sit and think and do something productive. And so these were some of the aspects of it. So in my case, I use the Fast for Peace as a hub for a number of reasons. One is that it's free. It doesn't cost anything. People can participate wherever they are. They can incorporate a 24-hour period into their life of putting that intention and abstaining from food. We've had people behind bars that we share the fast together in solidarity, and to have a shared experience on both sides of prison walls.
Yeah,
it is. So that's one. It's accessible, right? Nobody has to buy anything. It's nice to see like big giant protests on TV and things like that, but there's a certain amount of privilege that it takes to be able to leave work for the day, have childcare, drive to these events and things like that. Whereas again, the fast is accessible. And as we just were talking about, right, the fast encourages you to willingly give something up, to do with less, to practice incorporating that. As part of the larger political aspects of it, fasting and compromise are two sides of the same coin, that willingly giving something up. And so when it comes to addressing politics in our country, we've sort of lost the ability to compromise in many cases. And so we need to recapture that spirit. And so the fast helps us practice that.
Gosh. Yeah, recently within the Michael Nagler's program, the Meta Center for Nonviolence, we spent an entire month discussing constructive program and possibilities and what is the Kadi of the United States in particular in our current culture. And everybody had different ideas, gardening, bicycles, these are all different kinds of discussions. But you've made a case so far that you've completely convinced me that this monthly fast really is the best option so far that I've heard presented. So I'm really grateful that you brought it up.
So none of those answers are wrong. Gardening, bicycling, right? Those are, can be beneficial activities just in and of themselves. But so many of our problems today are structural problems in our society. And, I've got the U.S. Capitol behind us, and it's the failure of Congress to act, the failure of Congress to set national policy for years, sometimes decades, on many of these important issues. And, so the executive branch and the judicial branch, they step in to pick up some of the slack, but the legislative branch has tied itself in knots.
Yes.
And so to revitalize the United States, to begin over again, to have a nonviolent revolution, we've got to make the machinery of Congress work. We've got to seize those gears of political machinery and make them run in a way that serves all of us, that works to serve the 100% instead of just the connected few.
Yes.
And so my drawing on my years serving in the legislature, I've spent many months doing the work that Congress has failed to do. Not just me, but listening to lots and lots of groups with lots of knowledge about what sort of solutions are needed on the national level, and compiling these into a comprehensive package of legislation for Congress, with the intention of collectively bargaining for its passage in the 2026 midterms.
Wow.
And so let's talk about politics for a minute, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. Please take it away.
Again, the framers were well intentioned, right? No, they were not trying to set up dysfunction. They were trying to do the best that they could. There were no modern democracies in 1776 or 1787, right? They were making it up as they went along, and so, but they were also imperfect, and we know more today, right? And so again, and they were developing a system. Again, when the fastest form of communication was you give a message to somebody and put them on a horse, and that's how news traveled, right? And okay, well, that system made sense in the 18th century, right? That's why in Washington, D.C., the executive, legislative, and judicial branches are all within, a number of blocks of each other, because that was the only, you had to communicate. But we're in the 21st century. You and I are on opposite sides of the country having a conversation in real time.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It is amazing. And so our democracy can be upgraded as well, along with our communication, right? We can establish people's legislative assemblies across the country and do the policy work that Congress is failing to do. Unfortunately, I am a bit of a policy wonk. I like to get into the details and the nitty-gritty of making sure things that work, because somebody has to do it. And as I described, lots of times it's the lobbyists. The lobbyists are the ones who are willing to get in there and make sure that all the little details line up in their favor to advantage them. And so how do we, the people, counteract that? And sort of the stock answer, John, is to say, well, we're going to elect a white knight. and they're going to charge into that swamp of Washington, D.C., and they're going to take on that army of 10,000 lobbyists and clean everything up. I'm sorry, it's not a realistic solution.
Yeah.
It's not. And so we need a different way to come at this problem. So using modern technology by establishing a people's legislative assembly that can write good, clean legislation outside the swamp of Washington, we can, the people, write a set of legislative demands and then deliver it to Washington and say, here's what we want to help you accomplish. Again, elections are an adversarial system. Right? The framers had the idea, well, people compete in this marketplace of ideas by putting ideas forward in elections, and then the best idea will rise to the top, and that's how we will get things done. The framers were optimists. I can relate. I'm an optimist too. There's no mention of political parties in the Constitution because they didn't want them. They wanted to have zero political parties. You might know that the Constitution as written made the vice president was the runner-up. So right. whoever came in second, well, you're the vice president. And amazing. That got changed pretty quickly because they realized that did not work. And the reason it didn't work was math. This was the thing that nobody explained to my 20-something self, is that mathematically, as long as elections are winner take all, they will always tend towards two parties. They will always coalesce around two. Because when the object is just to get 50% plus one, then the smaller parties get absorbed into larger ones to make that winning coalition.
Yes.
And that is what has happened. We have had a two-party system going back all the way to that 18th century and the election of 1800. And it will always tend to that way. And so while we can rail against it, well, we don't like it, we should change the concept, or we can just accept that fact and say, okay, so now what? Once we acknowledge reality as it is, once we accept it, how do we conform ourselves to it to make it work in a way that serves the people?
Yes.
And so the answer is a union. You might know that Dr. King was fighting for a union in Memphis when he was killed. That a union is a group of people who collectively bargain to improve their lives. Right? We've got workers' unions, labor unions are the most common form. Gandhi's first public fast was around strengthening a union. There's also teachers' unions, there's student unions, there's tenant unions. Unions are very useful in lopsided power arrangements, where the group that has numerical superiority doesn't have the power, but they want to be able to negotiate with the people who have the power. And so that perfectly describes the situation in the United States, where we the people, where a third of the country, John, is struggling, is living in or near poverty.
Amazing.
Right? In the richest country in the world. Yeah. We've got 10,000 kids who are going to go to sleep tonight in poverty through no fault of their own. Right? Who are the people who are saying those kids should go out and get jobs and improve
That's right. Life? Pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Right. No, we the adults, we as society have dropped the ball when we allow those conditions to exist. And so what do we do about it? Right? And if to the extent the answer is nothing, let someone else worry about it. Well, I'm not willing to accept that answer.
I agree.
Yeah. So the question was, so what do you do in an adversarial system? And so a union is not trying to seize power for itself, right? When the workers sit down with management, it's not to say, give us the keys, get out of here, we're in charge now. This is ours. They are there to reestablish, to renegotiate the relationship between the two sides. And so when this comes back to the Gandhian aspect of duty. After World War II, there was discussion as the United Nations was founded, like what are the principles that humanity should live by. And so H.G. Wells, who was a committed pacifist and socialist, and he wrote Gandhi and said, hey, I'm putting together this list of rights, of the rights of man. Well, here's my list. What else should I add to it? And Gandhi wrote back, he said, you started at the wrong end. You should start with a list of duties of men. And I promise you, their rights will follow as spring follows winter. And again, John, as an American, someone who was grown up on this concept of constitutional rights, and I have the right to do this and I have the right to do that. It took me a little while to come around to Gandhi's perspective. I definitely, it was a different concept. But I started to see that, once again, Gandhi was correct. That you have to start with the duties. because the political structure that I'm describing, where power flows from the people, is a bottom-up power structure. Again, the framers, well-intentioned, they established a system of rights because they were used to dealing with a king. Rights are a shield, right, to protect you from abusive authority from above. But in a bottom-up system, you can't build that on rights, because rights are, to a certain extent, they're a blank check. You're saying this is what I'm entitled to. And if that sort of system would be a Ponzi scheme. It would not function. So a bottom-up power structure has to be built on duty. It has to start with the fundamental question: what is it that we owe each other? And when we answer that, again, the rights will follow, like spring follows winter. So once I come around to this acceptance that, once again, Gandhi was onto something, I started looking around and, okay, well, if we were going to make a list of the duties of men, well, what would that look like? And again, John, I use the word man in the historical inclusive sense. This is not like humanity as a whole. All right,
No, thank you for saying that. It's worth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a problem when you deal with history and attitudes and evolve over time. Man, I grew up in the 80s, and when I watch 80s movies with my kids, I have to explain, you don't treat women this way.
Yes.
The way that people thought was funny back in the 80s, that is highly inappropriate. We don't do that. Cultures change, cultures advance, and yes. So so anyways, so when I say so the duties. All right. So what are the duties that we should live by? Well, John, it turns out that the framers have an answer to this question. When they wrote the Constitution starts off with a preamble. Maybe you remember learning this like in grade school or something.
That's right.
It goes, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, we're here to do 5 things: to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So the Constitution, when we talk about it and say, oh, I have a constitutional right, we forget, or we've been misled in order to forget, that the Bill of Rights was a series of amendments. They came after the fact. They were tacked on later. The Constitution is a framework for government, and it starts with a list of duties.
That's right.
It is right. And what's, and after I came around to that, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is perfect. What can we as Americans agree on? Well, it turns out it's right there in the Constitution. The Constitution is our shared political ancestor. Republicans, Democrats, Greens, Libertarians, everybody. It's the American Constitution. So we should be able to agree that, yes, we support the Constitution and the goals laid out for us in the preamble. Eventually, I realized that there's also a method to that madness of that ordering, in which case we take care of others first. Establish justice, domestic tranquility, common defense, the general welfare, and then 5th, the blessings of liberty to ourselves. First, we take care of others. And so even the very structure of the preamble reinforces this idea of duty as the very core of what it means to be an American.
How beautiful.
It really is, John. And again, I love this country. And we have so much potential in this country that's being wasted, that's being squandered. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can fix this. We can put this country on a path to a bright and bountiful future.
But to recognize that the seed from which the tree of our liberty, the tree of the United States grew, the seed was the duties that we acknowledge toward each other, the importance that we hold that space of this is the way that we're going to structure our republic. We're going to structure our space and our relationships and our communities based on that duty that I have to you, to take care of you. And that is so different from what so much of the culture has evolved into. That reset, I feel like, is very important.
Again, the Constitution is a framework for government. These were people who saw that the United States was struggling under the Articles of Confederation. It did not work, and that the United States ran the risk of falling apart. And so when those 55 white men, all gathered in Philadelphia, right? There were a lot of perspectives that were not at the table, but they loved their country and they looked for a way to find a better structure to answer the question, what should government be doing? What are our responsibilities? What do we want to accomplish as a nation? Who do we want to be? And they made compromises, right? The 3/5 compromise was not, let's find a way to screw over black people. It was a compromise, which was, look, you have to do something to address how is representation proportioned. And so they made compromises. When they got done, George Washington said, look, this is the best that we could have done at this time. And then they signed on the line, dotted line, and they sent it out to the states. And John, again, this, I believe, is the true spirit of the Constitution, is compromise. Is that willingness to put the greater good, the good of the United States over, what might be absolutely, what you might prefer. Right? New York, for example. New York made a lot of money from tariffs. They had a big port, and by joining the United States, they were giving that up. They were ceding that to the United States. But they were willing to compromise. And so, as we talked about the fast and compromise, they're two sides of the same coin, that willingly giving something up. And so the fast can help reconnect us to that true spirit of the Constitution as we try and answer the question for our 250th birthday. What kind of nation do we want to be?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
So would you like to hear a little bit more about my answer to that question?
Please
my
do.
proposal
Yeah.
for
I'm learning so much from this. I'm continuing to digest.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the question of elections first before we get into that answer. Actually, all right, let me jump slightly around, which is to answer the question is, what are the principles that this legislative package is built on? This legislative package is the Partnership of Ordinary People Undermining Lobbyist Influence for Societal Transformation Act of 2026. Did you catch that, the acronym?
Say it one more. No, I didn't get the acronym.
The Partnership of Ordinary People Undermining Lobbyist Influence for Societal Transformation. That spells out the word populist. This is the Populist Act. The word populist, John, I learned we know exactly where and when it was invented. It was invented on a train in May of 1891 as some delegates were coming back from a convention for the People's Party. People's Party was a brand new third party trying to challenge Republican Democrats during the first Gilded Age. The first Gilded Age was this time of great wealth inequality at the end of the 19th century, where there had been the Industrial Revolution and such had produced really concentrated wealth, had produced a lot of monopolies, and with that concentrated wealth and influence had produced a lot of political corruption. Any of these things sound familiar?
Is that vague reminiscence?
Vaguely, yeah, right. Well, it's because we are today living in the second Gilded Age.
That's right.
And once again, we are dealing with these same problems. And so the People's Party, or since they didn't want to be known as the people's partyist or whatever, they came up with the term populist. And so the populists, they ran on breaking up monopolies, reducing government corruption. One of the big things that they were known for was trying to fix the monetary system. They wanted to add silver to the money supply because the problem was there wasn't enough money circulating, and the people who had it were hoarding it, and the people who didn't were suffering. And we need more money in circulation. And so what's interesting to me, one of the many things that's interesting to me, John, is that Gandhi, before he set out on the Salt March in 1930, he sent a list of demands to the Viceroy of India. And one of those demands was monetary reform. That he knew that the Indian people were being screwed over, and he wanted to address that. So monetary reform comes up fairly frequently in history once you know to look for it. And so it is part of the solution in the Populist Act of fixing our monetary system so that it doesn't run on debt and instead makes money serve the people instead of putting us in service to it.
Hmm.
Sorry, I think I got off on another tangent there. What
No, I
were,
appreciate it. Well, it's amazing how many directions each of these duties that we have to each other in order to restore the health of our country, it has to include as a part of the web all the aspects of our lives, because everything is intersectional. And if we don't have a holistic view of the people, then we can't make real change, because everything will shift back. Once you've made this small adjustment here, the pressure, the rest of the system will just grind it to dust. And so if it's not large enough as a net to encompass the whole of it, everything shifts back. I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine, and that's the main principle in my practice as well, is that you have to help someone adjust to the whole of their health. Otherwise, they just shift back to whatever the problem was before. And so I really appreciate how vast your perspective on this is, and how grand your ambition, because that may be the only possible way through.
And so you've touched on the reason that I started talking about the Populist Act a minute ago in the first place, and that is the principle of universality, right? The principle of everything as a whole. This is why I talk about building an America that works for the 100%. Because while it's understandable the frustration, the Occupy Wall Street movements, we are the 99%, it's still dividing humanity into an us versus them.
Yeah.
Right? And so we really need our focus to be on the 100%. And again, I acknowledge there's a certain amount of privilege that comes along with being a white guy, and I don't mean to. I'm not. So recognizing that, the Populist Act scrupulously avoids identity politics. Right? There is no special carve-outs for any groups, any people. It focuses on the economic issues, because the economic issues are what drive and what facilitate a lot of the division in our country. And so if we can get the economics again to work for the 100%, to work for all of us, then a lot of these other problems will solve themselves, will work themselves out.
Yes.
And so one of the key features of the Populist Act is UBI, unconditional basic income or universal basic income, which if you're not familiar, it is a fixed sum of money that goes out to every citizen unconditionally, no strings attached. And that universality, that unconditionality is important for a number of reasons. One is to draw a circle around everybody. With our safety net, with welfare programs, we divide a line and say, okay, you people on this side, you get some, this people on this side, you don't. And that division has been used to polarize us.
Yes.
Over the decades. And say, well, if you would just help, if we all work together, we could shift the line, and then the people screw over the people on that side, and then we'll be better off. And when you draw a circle around everybody, you avoid that, and you recognize the humanity and the value in everyone universally and unconditionally. And that's the framing that I'm trying to steer the United States in the direction of. So the policies in the Populist Act have that as a core theme of universality, not trying to target or benefit, penalize or benefit any particular group or people.
But to nourish those qualities that will lift everybody.
Yes. And again, and so it's understanding, so there's no billionaire tax in there or anything like that, and which is popular for, there are good reasons to want to support something like that, in progressive left-leaning circles. But at the end of the day, that it rests on othering a group of people, right? This group of people should be treated differently than the rest of us. And because it's got the Gandhian, the ends determine the means. I'm sorry, the means determine the ends, right? If we try and get to this happier place by demonizing a small group of people, then that will probably impact the way that the end result.
Yeah,
So,
well, it must, because the movement itself is built around the othering principle.
so well, that being said, and again, I've worked at this for years in promoting UBI as a solution to addressing so many of our economic as well as our cultural problems. Again, that the all-encompassing vision of universality, unconditionality, that I think of it as unconditional love, the agape love. That look, if you hand a check to every single American, some of them are going to make bad decisions, John. Some of them are going to make stupid decisions with their money. And wouldn't it be better if we just put strings on it and we told people what they could and couldn't do with it? Wouldn't it be better for them? And again, that's understandable, but that's not how unconditional love works.
Yeah.
Unconditional love says, look, even if you screw up, I still love you.
Yeah.
And so UBI says, look, even if you do something stupid with your money, your country, we still love you, and you're going to get a check against next month, and you're going to get money again next month and next month. So no matter what you do, we love you, we care for you, we're here to support you, because again, the Constitution says, this is one of our duties, is to promote the general welfare. Welfare, we think of it today in terms of, government welfare, corporate welfare kind of thing. But you go and look it up in the dictionary, and the word has a very specific meaning. It means health, happiness, prosperity, well-being. And so it's written right there in the preamble, we're supposed to promote the general welfare. Just to make sure that nobody missed it, Congress wrote it again. I'm sorry, the framers wrote it again in Article 1, Section 8. They said Congress shall provide for the general welfare. And so when we talk about addressing things like, health, it's in the Constitution that Congress shall provide for the general health of the United States. That's what the Constitution says. And so universal health care, this built on the mechanisms of Bernie's Medicare for All, is included in the Populist Act as well. It's a little different. There will be premiums involved because, again, with UBI, first we're giving everybody money, but to run government, to run things costs money, and so there are taxes involved as well. But the idea, the principle is that we can abolish poverty in this country.
Yeah.
Like we very much have the means to do it.
We do.
We have the resources to do it. What we don't have is the way to organize to make it happen. So that's what my campaign in 2026 is about, is creating a mechanism where well, all right. We got too many balls juggling here in the air here. There's too many interrelated things.
Well, and let me add that how shocked I was to learn. I recently read through Rutger Bregman's books, and he talked about UBI and how in the United States we are actually very close to implementing it, even under Nixon, was it?
Yes.
And that was so shocking to me that this was something that we've already conceded to be important and even necessary. And it keeps coming back up and keeps coming back up. And so people talk about it as though it's this impossibility, but we've already been right up to the line several different times, and it was only details that kept us from implementing these methods.
There's some truth to that. Another way to see it is that it passed the Republican-controlled House, and then it went to the United States Senate, and there were some Democratic senators who, in an election year, did not want the Republican president to have a big political victory like passing this. And so it was by putting their own team, their political party, against over the people of the United States, they helped kill the bill to deny the other team a win.
I did not know.
And you're doing this as if like, oh my God, I can't believe people do, but we've seen this for decades and decades, right?
Yeah.
Right, when the Affordable Care Act passed in 2010, I was serving in the state legislature at the time, and we worked to try and incorporate its provisions and so on and so forth. But it was not a perfect bill, right? There were issues in it that needed to be addressed, and Congress could have addressed them going forward. But instead, the red team crossed their fingers and said, no, we're just going to absolutely oppose it, and we're not going to help, and we're not going to cooperate. We would rather see you fail than let you succeed. And so this comes back to our adversarial system of politics, where our system promotes a tribal identity. You have the red team and the blue team. And look, I grew up outside of Chicago, John. So I'm a sworn Chicago Bears fan. I am sworn to hate the Green Bay Packers for the rest of my life. I can't help it. That's just part of my identity. And that the Packers suck, and my second favorite team is whoever's playing against them this week. Right? So there's tribal identities. It's an important part of being human, right? This is how we define ourselves. But in the case of politics, those identities aren't based around any inherent principle. They are based on opposing the other team. And so we tell ourselves the story of, and I did as a young man with the Libertarian Party of like, this is the party of principle. My team is the principled one and everyone else just doesn't get it. But it turns out that that's not true. That as we've seen, especially in the last 10 years under President Trump, that what it means to be a Republican has changed. But it had changed before that. Reagan redefined what it was to be a Republican. And before that, Barry Goldwater redefined what it was to be a Republican. And going back to, so the definition of what it means to be a conservative or a liberal changes over time. And sometimes people try and anchor themselves to specific individuals, right? I'm a Jeffersonian liberal, or I'm a Reagan Democrat, because there is no fixed meaning of it. It's not based on a fixed set of principles. And so a union, on the other hand, doesn't have to define itself as being opposed to any one group or party, right? It's not organized around the principle of trying to defeat any particular politician or party. A union can be based on principle. A union can hew to these ideas of universality, of striving to offer dignity to as many people as possible. And so, yes, so unionizing as voters to collectively bargain for this better social contract. The problem, though, is, as we know, is that we have a two-party system. We've got the red team and the blue team. And if you care about politics, you're probably invested in one of those teams or the other. When I served in the legislature on the blue team, it was 2006. The red team had control of Washington, D.C. There was the Iraq War and everything, and I, along with millions and millions of other people around the country, were fed up and frustrated. And so I ran for state representative. I knocked on a lot of doors, and when that blue wave came, I paddled out there that I was able to ride the wave into office. And one of the things that didn't accomplish anything but made me feel good during that first term was one of the other representatives that tried to introduce a resolution to call for President Bush's impeachment. And we had a voice vote, and I yelled real loud, and yes, and we want, my team is better than your team. It is understandable. Again, it's human nature to be invested in those kinds of things, right? But it's not always productive.
Yeah.
And in the case of politics, it is definitely not productive. The people, I had an insight last year, John, that, as we draw this circle around all of humanity, right, and say we're all on the same team, no one is excluded. Well, in fact, there is somebody who's excluded, or there is entities that are excluded, and that's corporations. Corporations are not people.
Yeah.
So when we draw a circle around humanity, we can have corporations as our common enemy, our adversary. And in fact, in the United States today, I feel pretty okay with making that argument that corporations are our common enemy.
Yeah.
That they are they're crushing life in these United States because they're organized around greed, they're organized around profit. Not that profit is inherently a bad thing, but when it's fueled by greed and taking all that you possibly can, corporations can't observe a day of fasting.
Yeah.
It's an exclusively human thing. So there's a lot of anti-corporate stuff in the Populist Act, a lot of breaking up of concentrations of power, breaking up big tech, breaking up healthcare, breaking up media empires, and the tool that we have as citizens is government. Government is the tool that can address these things. If you and I decide we're going to boycott Google or whatever, Google is not going to lose any sleep.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to rake in billions and billions of dollars selling our personal data. It's not possible for us to change a lot of these systems as individuals. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't, strive to live the best lives and do the things like the bicycling and gardening and things like that. There's still value in those things, but those big structural changes really need to come from the top down. They need to come from Washington, D.C. We've got to get in there, and again, the Constitution is the hardware that our country runs on, right? And it's old, 250 years. The Constitution again is not perfect. And Congress hasn't put an amendment forward to the states that's been passed in more than 50 years. Since the 1970s, right? We could amend it, we just don't. But what really makes this country run is the United States Code. Those millions and millions of lines of code that are the operating system for our country. And so by writing a legislative package that will upgrade those lines of code, we can upgrade our operating system. We can upgrade our social contract. We can upgrade life in these United States without having to amend the Constitution, without having to change the way we vote. As we saw last year with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it's 268 people in Washington, D.C. can set national policy. That's it. That's how few people it takes if you can sufficiently motivate them. So how do you sufficiently motivate them? And I propose the answer is love, unconditional love, being willing to believe the best in people, trying to help them succeed. Again, I'm not organizing to defeat any particular party or politician, but to try and help Congress do the things that the Constitution says we should be doing, to steer us back to those 5 duties in the preamble. And so in terms of elections, a union of voters can't be opposed to any particular, again, you can't be trying to defeat anyone. You've got to try and help being willing to see people succeed. And so what that means is that in the election, I don't want to play this red team, blue team anymore. It's an artificial division. We don't have to play it. Instead, we can sort candidates for Congress into 2 buckets, the incumbents and the challengers. The incumbents are the people who are already in Washington, D.C. These are the people that 268 of them could change national policy if they wanted to. So a union of voters, my campaign is about trying to motivate Congress to act before the election. The deal for Congress pretty simply is enact the Populist Act before the election and we help you keep your jobs. Whether you're on the red team or the blue team doesn't matter. You deliver before the election and you can earn our support. If you refuse, however, then we can kick you out of office and kick you out of power. Again, red team, blue team doesn't matter. It's a strict, again, every 2 years is the way the framers set it up. Congress comes asking for a contract extension. They want to keep their jobs. And every 2 years, we the people get to decide whether or not they do.
Yes.
But we've got to stop this. We've got to reject this artificial division of red team and blue team and instead see Congress as a whole. Congress is management. We are the people. And so either management delivers and then we help them keep their jobs, or they refuse and then they have to face the consequences. So because so many people are invested in that red team, blue team dichotomy, this has frequently been a tough sell for me, John. This idea that we ought to negotiate with the red team. We ought to try and help President Trump succeed at delivering transformational change for our nation. And there are many people that do not want to see him succeed under any circumstances.
Yeah.
Sort of the way that UBI went down in the 1970s is, well, we'd rather see this person fail than the public benefit. And so that's the challenge.
That is quite a challenge.
It is quite a challenge. And you want to talk about President Trump for a minute? His first term, one of the nice things that I could say about him was that he hadn't started any new wars, right? He passed some pretty comprehensive criminal justice reform. And, and I tried to organize conditional support for him in 2020 to get people to say, look, let us help you get reelected on these terms. You get our legislation into law before the election, and then we can help you get reelected. But I could not get any critical mass of people to on board with that. And sometimes I wonder how perhaps life in these United States might have turned out different, because you can see it when you look at President Trump, right? He's a guy whose father did not offer him unconditional love.
Yeah.
It's very much conditional, and there's a hole there.
That's
and right. You can see that in his behavior. What would that, and how do we heal that? And so again, I believe the answer is love.
Yeah.
That being willing to say, we want to help you. We want to see you succeed, not just for your sake, but because you're on Team America too. And when you win, we can all win. We can all come out ahead.
That's right. One of the Gandhian principles about that really shocked me when I first learned about it not that long ago was this principle of don't humiliate the person on the other side of the table. Don't add shame to the mix, because the moment you do that, you create that adversarial relationship. They can't come back to the table with pride. They can't move forward with you because you've destroyed that relationship. And as soon as I heard Michael Nagler talking about that, the entire perspective on the media for me shifted, because I had already been following the comedians that made fun of the politicians, and I was looking at these people who, treated the opposite party, whatever that is, as clowns or the worst people in the world. And in the moment that they've created that, even if it creates a small cathartic, chuckle, on the behalf of whatever good team the side is, instantly you've made it impossible now for either party to move forward, because you can only move toward each other instead of in a direction. And so hearing you talk about it is just really wonderful, and I'm grateful that you're willing to bring it up this way, because it's such a rare discussion piece, but clearly needed.
Well, you've identified, and it comes up sometimes in the nonviolent circles, of how do you deal with an authoritarian regime, and humor, making fun of them, trying to make them lose their dignity, sometimes comes up as the tactic to use. And I see, for the reasons you just expressed, right? I see that as incompatible with true nonviolence and trying to make people lose dignity. Again, when I started reading about Gandhi, because I had read a lot about American history and the American Revolution, and how was our country built. And so reading about Gandhi was like a sequel to the American Revolution, right? He was taking on King George V instead of King George III. But what was amazing was that, he had staged a nonviolent revolution. His goal was for the British to leave as friends. And so you can contrast that to what we did in the United States. We pushed them out, and then 30 years later, we were back at war again, right? They left with very ill feelings. And, over time, obviously, we're back on the same page. But Gandhi made sure that they left as friends when they did. And it worked. India and Britain have never gone to war. They have stayed friends. Amazing. And so I think we've got to look at that same thing. Okay, if we need President Trump to leave office, we want to give him a dignified exit, right? What can we help him accomplish so that he leaves as a friend to the American people, to all of us? And so a lot of the Populist Act, Medicare for All, is on a bit of a rushed timetable, so that it would be rolled out by January 1, 2029. So that we can help President Trump make good on the campaign promise he made in 2016 to deliver universal health care for the people. I would love to see him succeed at that. Yeah. I really, really would. And it's been said lots of times. Lynn LBJ gets credit for a lot for saying it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets credit. And that's very true in Washington, D.C. And so, let President Trump put his name on the Populist Act. Let him take credit for accomplishing all these things. John, we're at a cyclical time of change in the United States. All right? We go through this about every 4 generations, from our American independence to the Civil War to the New Deal, where we reinvent ourselves, where we ask ourselves anew, what kind of nation do we want to be? It was, as Thomas Paine wrote in Common Sense in 1776, that we have it in our power to begin the world anew. And so we do that. And once again, we are at that cyclical tipping point. We are reinventing ourselves as a nation right now. I believe it is still an open road ahead of us, that we have choices. We could be down an authoritarian, dystopian road. That is certainly a possibility. But again, I do believe there is a path to a bright and bountiful future. And I very much want to see our country go down that path.
Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yeah. Can I bring this back again to Gandhi and the Salt March, right? Again, we know about the Salt March. This is his famous act of civil disobedience. But what is less known, right, is that this list of demands that I mentioned a little while ago. Before the Salt March, he said, here's our terms. We don't have to fight. We don't have to do this thing, but here's what we would need. Here's what we need. He gave them, the British, a set of demands. Again, many of them which we recognize today, the monetary reform, shrink the military, taxes, control of the police, police oversight, a lot of a lot of issues that come up time and time again. And so it's the same Gandhian tactic of saying, look, these are our terms. We want to work with you on these things. And I do not see, as a matter of principle, I don't see any difference in offering terms to the President of the United States today versus Gandhi offering terms to the British Viceroy in 1930. But again, there are unfortunately people who are invested in the red team, blue team dichotomy that, I don't know. Sometimes it frustrates me sometimes. And so the British turned it down. So Gandhi went ahead with the Salt March, as we know, right? He spent 24 days marching to the sea and arrived on April 6th, 1930 to illegally make salt. Again, monopolies is another thing that comes up time and time again, right? The British had a monopoly on salt.
Yeah.
If you needed salt, you had to buy it from them. And Gandhi, it was an anti-monopoly protest. Sorry, I'm really tempted to go onto a tangent about the Boston Tea Party, but I'm going to stick with Gandhi. So Gandhi made salt and waited for the British to arrest him. They didn't, but all across the country, people started illegally making salt. They filled the jails, they clogged the jails, 60, 70, 80,000 people got arrested. And finally, the British couldn't take it anymore. They had to negotiate. They could not let civil disobedience go on anymore. So they had to negotiate with Gandhi. And they let him out of prison on January 26, 1931. They negotiated the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Irwin being Viceroy, he was the Viceroy. In England, they call it the Irwin-Gandhi Pact. So it depends on your perspective, who gets first bill.
That's right.
But yeah, so he negotiated this thing. And you know what had happened to the salt laws? Nothing. He didn't get the salt laws repealed. They were still in place. Right? He got some political prisoners released. There was a lot of people in the movement like, we put a lot of time and effort into this, and this is the deal that you worked out. Some people were disappointed, but John, you know what he got with that Gandhi-Irwin Pact? He got something that wasn't written down on paper, but he got something very important. He made the British recognize the Indian people as a bargaining unit. He made them acknowledge that they could not rule without their consent. And so a union of voters, even if in 2026 we're not successful in actually getting the Populist Act passed, if we can in fact demonstrate to Washington that kicking out a large number of incumbents of both parties means that you cannot rule without our consent, we can establish the American people as a bargaining unit. We can say we no longer need to depend on the red team and the blue team to go sit in one room in Washington, D.C. and write policy. We, the people, can do it ourselves. And you cannot rule without our consent. That's what we can accomplish in 2026 by coming together and demanding passage of the Populist Act. Take credit. We want Congress to take credit for delivering transformational change, or be willing to face the consequences for refusal. Because it's so easy to point fingers and say, I couldn't do it. We didn't like this, that, or the other. Dr. King, in his last book, which was Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here? And chaos certainly, again, seems to be an option on the table. I'm trying to steer us towards community. But he said it is our nettlesome task to discover, to create a situation in which the government will find it wise and prudent to collaborate with us. So how do we do that? Why would the government want to collaborate with us? Because as a union of voters, nationwide, a small percentage can determine whether the red team or the blue team wins Congress. And again, because the red team and the blue team define themselves as trying to beat the other guy by their own rules, they must do everything they can to win power. And so when, John, are you familiar with the 3.5% rule?
Yes, but I'd love to hear you talk about it with Erica Chenoweth. Yeah,
exactly. And then so she finds that 3.5% mass movements at 3.5%, that's what it takes for a nonviolent movement to deliver political change. Well, it's also true when it comes to the ballot box, because the United States is a deeply divided, is a pretty evenly split country. And so nationwide, a union of 3.5% of the electorate can predetermine whether the red team or the blue team controls Washington, D.C. I'm here in North Carolina, and I am campaigning for votes in our upcoming U.S. Senate race because while 3.5% is true nationwide, in a lot of places it's an even smaller number.
Yes.
And here in North Carolina, we have an open Senate seat. The red team and the blue team are all geared up to spend $1 billion getting North Carolinians to angry and stirred up and wanting to fight the other team. And at the end of the day, though, it's about 1%, about 70,000 voters, or 1% of the electorate, will determine whether the red team or blue team gets this seat. And so my mission over the next few months is to build this network and to persuade 1% of North Carolinian voters to reject hate, to bind themselves together in love, and around a positive vision of what the United States could accomplish by working together and by enacting the Populist Act. So that 3.5% rule, again, it's a much smaller percentage. When we talk about third parties, one of the things, again, I didn't realize it in my younger 20-something self, that for a third party to win, you need 35% of the vote, at least, right, to split the vote 3 ways. But as a union of voters, when you're not trying to seek power for yourself, you can accomplish much more with a tenth of that.
Yes.
Sorry to bring this back, tie this back again to the Gandhian the concept of duty. Again, I'm not running for office. I don't want anybody to vote for me. I'm a flawed human being, and the idea of representative democracy, like that one person can faithfully represent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of very unique individuals. I mean, it's kind of ludicrous when you think about it. But by unionizing voters, I'm not asking to represent them. I'm asking people to give an up or down vote on a specific package of legislation. I'm asking Congress up or down on this package of legislation to force a situation where the government will find it wise and prudent to collaborate with us, because a union of voters can determine whether or not they keep their jobs.
And it's possible.
Well, right. And so, it's very possible that Congress says, we don't care, we refuse to do it, we're not going to do anything. But under this model, you treat all of Congress as a whole. Congress is management. A lot of stuff these days is performative, like the House and the Senate, each of them do different things, and then nothing happens. Like, oh, well, it was the other chamber's fault. Sorry, I tried. No excuses. Congress as a whole enacts the Populist Act, and if they do, then every single incumbent is eligible for the support, and if they refuse, then every one of their major party challengers is eligible. And again, trying to help them succeed, doing great transformational things for our country, and tapping into all this potential that we have as a nation.
Yes. Yeah, we want management to succeed in making our world a better, safer, happier space for all of us to live in.
Right. So again, so that the union is that idea of duty, of we're collectively bargaining for the whole, and not to seek power for ourselves, but to serve the group that you're representing.
So if I can ask you then, so other than wearing an orange shirt, what are some actionable steps that people can move forward right away? As soon as they finish this video, they click on the next thing, and
Right.
they go out and they do the next thing. And what are those steps that you'd recommend?
Right. Well, you can visit my website, which is votewithbrian.com. And again, I'm focused mostly on North Carolina, but this is a national effort, right? We have 470 congressional races in the midterms, and it's one package deal across the entire country. What I remember back in the 1990s when the Republicans came to power in 1994, they did something called the contract with America, and they ran on one platform nationwide, and they got themselves elected because they had a consistent message. And this what we have today, which is 470 individual contests where people, two candidates come and they debate various issues and everything. And again, Washington D.C. is a swamp, right? People can get elected with the best of intentions that they want to see things fixed, and then they get there and they learn that they can't. And so as much as fun maybe as it is to blame people and say, well, it's your fault for not fixing the system. Maybe we should also acknowledge that the system is broken and dysfunctional, and
Yes.
it's not necessarily possible for one person to do it. Yeah, I can't fix things, you can't fix things, none of us can individually. But by coming together as a whole, coming together as a group, we can accomplish so much more by working together. So come check out the website. We've got, you can read the legislative package for those of you who are policy wonks. You can also, there's distilled versions and we're making some AI explainer videos, that break it down. Again, one of the problems with the issue with representative democracy, right, is that you're being asked to put your trust in someone and say, all right, I'm going to let you make decisions on my behalf for the next 2 years or 6 years or whatever. And so for that reason, electoral contests these days shift from the question of policy, to the question of who. What's wrong with this person? What are their flaws? What's the worst thing this person has ever done? Right? How do we drag this person down and make ourselves look better by comparison?
Yes.
And it's not, again, that has a lot of toxic effects to our society as a whole. Right? But by shifting to this model of unionizing as voters, we can drill down on the what. I might be the most horrible person you have ever met, John, right? With a terrible, terrible past, but it doesn't matter in the sense that I'm not asking you to elect me to anything. I'm only asking you to look at a proposed piece of legislation and then decide up or down.
Yeah.
This is how the Constitution was adopted in the United States, is that once the convention sent it to Congress, Congress kicked it out to the 13 states and said, here's the deal. You can vote up or down on the Constitution. That's it. Those are your only two choices. Some states didn't like it. They wanted amendments and things like that, but that wasn't the option. You could take it or you could leave it. It was as is. And so here in North Carolina, in fact, we voted it down the first time around. And then once the United States was formed and the Bill of Rights started moving forward, we went ahead and adopted a vote to accept the Constitution. So it's that, again, this is one of the many things that I learned in serving in the state legislature, is that at the end of the day, you got to vote up or down on a specific piece of legislation. And people can bring all sorts of different motivations to it. But at the end of the day, it's irrelevant. It's either you vote up or you vote down. And so this is a big tent that can support the Populist Act, where nobody likes everything in it. I don't like everything in it. Some of my colleagues from the legislature would be like, he's proposing what? Like, what is in there? One of my big fights in the legislature was against voter ID. And there are provisions in the Populist Act that after the United States Treasury sets people up with digital treasury accounts to distribute our UBI, that those accounts then can be used to verify voting, so that people would have to prove their citizenship by verifying their account before casting a vote. I wish that kind of thing wasn't necessary, but it is a concern of people on the red team today, this idea of voter fraud, and even though all the evidence is that it's incredibly rare, but okay, so that mechanism is in the Populist Act. We'll put a mechanism in place where people have to verify their citizenship before casting a ballot, after we have made sure that everyone has an account with the U.S. Treasury that verifies their citizenship for them. It's not like voter ID laws today, where you're putting a burden on people who may not have the right documents.
That's right. Making it extra difficult for the people who have
Right.
already the
First, you make sure everybody has it, and then you can.
That's right.
manage it. So there's again, I don't like everything in it. Just like the framers, nobody liked everything in the Constitution. But what I do love is the United States, and I want to see us get our act together.
Yes.
And so if people can come together and say, I like 80% of this, and that we will come out ahead by adopting this thing as a whole, in the same way that they did with the Constitution. We can upgrade our operating system. We can install a much needed upgrade and update to the way that our country runs. So that's you asked me at the beginning, right? What am I positive, or what am I optimistic about? And again, I'm optimistic about our potential as a nation and what we we could accomplish with using modern technology, modern 21st century collaborative democracy. And so that once we establish ourselves, the American people can bargain for themselves outside of the political parties. This is not a one-off, right? This is putting a new system in place. So that 2 years from now, in 2028, once we have demonstrated the efficacy of this model, then people will be willing to spend the time and effort that I have in digging into all the policy details, knowing that it's not just that we can actually bargain directly with Congress. And so we can establish nationwide a People's Legislative Assembly, again, using that monthly fast for peace as the hub of this model, where a People's Legislative Assembly, using delegative democracy, so that individuals can delegate their authority to specific individuals directly instead of representative democracy. We can have a People's Assembly that writes a package of policies, and then for the 2028 election, say, all right, this is what we want, Congress. You can take it and you take credit for it and keep your jobs, or you can refuse and face the consequences.
Yes.
Let us help you succeed. But by doing this in an open, transparent manner, again, the Populist Act isn't something you got to pass the bill to find out what's in it. It's open, it's open, and people can read it, all the fine details. Open source software. I'm not a tech guy. I don't know, just because something's open source, I don't get in and inspect all the code and everything. But I have more faith in the process because I know it is open source. I know that people can go and look, that transparency, I think gives it more credibility and validity.
Yes.
And so my hope is that by, again, putting a legislative package out there for everyone to look at and make, look under the hood, that transparency will lend itself to credibility and to positive action in the midterms.
We can do it.
Most definitely.
Thank you so much, my friend. This is fantastic, and it's an entirely new perspective and a new direction. And like you said, it's filled with hope. It's based on positive direction, and something that, instead of a lot of the people that I've seen over the years, they're motivated by doing something that takes down the bad guy, that attacks their adversary. They will even injure themselves in an attempt to hurt the people that they dislike, which we see very often.
Yeah.
And the kind of motivation that generates is very different than one when we're linking arm in arm and we're moving together forward toward a better future. And that very much comes through from what you're teaching and what you're sharing with us and organizing around. And I'm so grateful that you're out there doing it.
Yeah. So let me invite you again to join us in the Fast for Peace on the 15th of each month.
I will do it.
You can learn more at fastforpeace.org.
Mm-hmm.
It was a couple of years ago that I realized that Dr. Martin Luther King, when he wrote his letter from Birmingham jail, that he outlined four parts to a nonviolent program, which was, collection of the facts and then negotiation. And so, we've collected the facts of what are the problems in the United States. Lots of different groups have contributed ideas to the Populist Act. And there's a willingness to negotiate with Congress as well. But the third step before direct action is self-purification. Self-purification is an essential part of a nonviolent program. And so the Fast for Peace has an aspect of that as well, of, again, demonstrating, I'm not doing this because I want to get an unconditional basic income. I'm not doing this out of greed, but I'm motivated by trying to solve problems. And so self-purification, then direct action will take place on Election Day, November 3rd.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Thank you again.
I appreciate you so much. Are there any last points that you wish that everybody knew?
There's so much I wish everybody knew, but I could keep going. Right.
Oh gosh. And we can do this again.
Okay.
When you have another bundle of wisdom that you'd like to share. you expound upon. I just feel very grateful for that chance to sit here and take it all in.
Okay. Well, I hope you found it persuasive that
Very much so.
yeah, that again, we can accomplish more working together than we can fighting against each other.
Yeah, that seems very clear.
Yeah.
Gosh. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you, Brian, for sharing your passion and leadership with us today. May we fast from fear and pride, feast on kindness every day, finding strength in listening well, choosing love to lead the way. Till we meet again, dear friends, may our differences inspire, not to build another wall, but to gather round the fire.